We're live. We're here. Hello. How are you? I hope you had an amazing weekend. Today's notes are all going to be about how physical location matters. Where you are in the world matters. So we're going to be looking at Asia. We're going now to Central Asia. And we're going to be looking at the stands. So that's why we have 4-20-20 exploring the stands. Now, the stands, Afghanistan, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, Pakistan, and Kyrgyzstan, they all have the ending stan because the word stand, or the ending, actually means the home of. So, like Afghanistan actually means home of the Afghans. Kyrgyzstan, it means home of the Kyrgyz. I know that when we look at this in a little bit, it can be difficult to remember them, so I've made you a really easy to remember mnemonic device, which is Ut-Ap-Tka. It just rolls off the tongue. I'll show you in a second. So let's get to it. Geography of this area, of the Central Asia, of the stands. It is arid and dry. That is because of both being landlocked and because of the rain shadow effect. So if we just look Google Maps here for a second. And if we make that a little bigger. Now here's the area we're looking at. Hey, look. Ut-Ap-Tka. It makes perfect sense, doesn't it? Now if we just look at this area, and we turn it to satellite view, you can see just by comparing the area around it that this is a pretty dry area. It doesn't look nearly as green, and the reason for that is there's not as much water. We're going to talk about that. But it does show you the great, like, whenever you see that just harsh divide between green and tan, I guarantee you mountains are involved. So let's go figure out how mountains can make such a huge difference in access to water. Okay, I showed you that they're arid and dry. The rain shadow effect. So mountains determine how much water certain areas receive, and here's why. There's moisture in the air right now. Like if you go, there's moisture from your mouth going into that. There's moisture in the air. It's see? It fogged up. Pretty sweet, right? Yeah. Anyway, what happens is the warmer the air is, the more moisture it can hold. The colder the air gets, the less moisture it can hold. So if we look at like just one of these fantastic pictures, water, what's the word for when the sun hits it? Evaporates. Water evaporates, and then some of that moisture goes into the air. As that air gets moved up the mountain, it gets colder, and because it gets colder, the air can't hold as much moisture, so it releases that moisture in the form of precipitation. Snow or rain, depending on how cold it is. But then when that air gets to the other side of the mountain, all the water's gone. And as a result of that, you can get deserts. You can get really dry areas. Great real-life examples of this. Hawaii, right there. You can see that this clearly, the wind is going from the east to the... What's going on? From the east to the west. If we go back here, looking at this tells you you've got all this moisture coming in from the Bay of Bengal, from the Indian Ocean. It's coming from the south, moving to the north, but then when it hits these mountains, by the time it gets on the other side of it, there's no moisture left, which is why it's such a dry area. Okay, so what? Why does this matter? 6 of the 7 stands are landlocked. Pakistan is the exception. And what that means is this. They do not have access to the ocean or an open body of water. So if we look again back at our map, if you live in these countries, if you live in any of the Ut-Ap-Tka countries minus Pakistan, it's very difficult for you to get goods. So what we can do is if we look at this, so if we live in Ut-Ap-Tka minus Pakistan, if you want to get goods delivered to you, I don't know why you're zooming in, don't do it. If you want to get goods delivered to you, they need to come from the ground or from flight, and both of those are either slow or really expensive. So when we're looking at the landlocked countries, this is the Caspian Sea. It's a big body of water, but it doesn't have access to this, to the rest of the world. Pakistan does. Pakistan has the ability to ship things from here. I wish you'd go to the world. Can I show you the world? What happens if I push that? To this. Oh, perfect. Okay. If you are landlocked if you want to sell things or if you want to buy things, it's going to make it a lot more difficult for you. So that is what landlocked means. And as I sort of just mentioned, this is why it's important. Everything is more expensive. So if you want to buy stuff, you're going to pay more for it than your neighbor who has access to the sea does. Not because they're better than you, not because you're worse, but because of geography. Because they can get things from the sea, which is the cheapest way to actually ship goods and services. What is my link for this one? Oh, this is a video worth watching. We're going to full screen this one. Hopefully.
Think about some of the biggest and most prosperous cities you've been to. What do many of them have in common? Water! They sit on a major coast or on a major river. This map shows GDP density, how much GDP is produced per square kilometer. You can see that the coasts of the US and the areas along the navigable rivers of the Great Lakes regions are just chock full of GDP. Likewise in Western Europe, in Japan, along the coast of China, and the coast of Australia.
Just a real quick interruption. GDP is gross domestic product. It is how much wealth the country is creating. So that is GDP. The higher GDP, the typically speaking, higher the wealth of the country. Okay.
Why is this? It's much cheaper to transport goods over water than over land. So, Adam Smith argued that access to water reduced the cost of trade and gave merchants access to larger markets. In turn, larger markets gave merchants a greater incentive to specialize and to innovate. As a result, civilization grew where trade was easiest. Even today, countries that are landlocked are on average poorer than countries that have access to a coast. What's the most landlocked continent of all? It also happens to be the continent with the most poor countries, Africa. First off, Africa is enormous. You can fit most of the United States, China, India, and a lot of Europe into Africa. That's big. Second, Africa is landlocked. While Africa is far bigger in total size than Europe, if you just measure the coastline, Europe has 2 to 3 times more coastline than does Africa. And because Africa is big and landlocked, trade is more expensive and economic growth slower to start. What we learn from this foray into civilization and geography is 2 things. First, being landlocked is like a natural tariff, a natural tax on trade. And if natural tariffs are bad for growth, then perhaps tariffs created by governments aren't that great for growth either. Second, growth is not just about policy. Some places have natural blessings that have helped those places to prosper, and that too helps us understand our world. If you want to test yourself...
Okay, we don't need the test. I trust you. All right. Come back to me. I'm back. You're back. We're back. We're in this together. Okay, so that video once again tried to show you that when you have access to water, when you have access to the open sea, it is a lot cheaper for you to ship things. If you're landlocked, you don't have that. What you need instead is you need rail, trains, quality roads, or flight. You need those things because if you are going to be shipping things via truck or other things, the road needs to be able to hold a certain amount of weight. And if you don't have that, then they can't ship the things to you. You cannot get the goods. One of the things that people are looking into because of that is trying to figure out how do we most efficiently ship goods over rail, by land. If you ever look at a train, each one of these little each one of these little cars is the equivalent of a semi-truck. So trains can bring a lot of goods to a lot of people, but you need to have the track built. And if you're in a really mountainous area, which we talked about for the stands, is a really mountainous area, that makes it difficult to get the train track built. All right. Ship. Okay, this is our last thing. So, shipping on water allows lower costs. We've said it before. We're repeating it again with larger amounts. This is mind-boggling. It. Look at me. Look at me. I'm looking at you. This is mind-boggling how big these things are. So, looking at this, here's a boat. Here's a boat. Here in the background, you may think that's just like this giant building. It's a boat. And if we look at these boats, scroll up, Russ. Each one of those is one of those trucks. It's one of the cargo. I think they call them TEUs in this. Let me scroll down and see what it says. TEU. Yep. That is the 20-foot containers. That would be the same as an equivalent. Here you can see if they were stacked up as a building, just how big that is. So what we're looking at is that ships, in order to get goods from one point to another point as quickly as possible, as cheaply as possible, ships are getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And if you look at the capacity of what they're able to hold, every time you see 6,000 to 8,000, 4,000, 5,000, this TEU is just another way of saying this. Like these little, the back of a semi-truck when you see those on the roads, each one of that. So you could fit like 18,000 semi-trucks on this boat. That's a lot of stuff you're moving. Let's summarize our notes. We're looking at Asia, and we're looking at the impact of physical geography on the well-being of people. When we're looking at the stands, which is very easy to remember, always remember, At-ap-taka! It comes off the tongue. These are dry areas, these are landlocked areas. These are areas that do not have access to trade easily, which is affecting their economic well-being, which is affecting the people's quality of life. Okay, I hope today's notes made sense. We're going to see. Rock on. Take care. Bye-bye.